the price of a single bullet, or why geniuses often go without glory. You know what I sometimes think about? Looking at old black and white photographs? War is not just about battles and heroes. It is a giant, soulless conveyor belt. A conveyor belt of death, yes, but also a conveyor belt of ideas. Every second, in the rear, in stuffy design bureaus, in makeshift workshops, dozens, hundreds of inventions were born. Some were as simple as a shovel. Others were as complex as a Swiss watch. And here is the main question that haunts me. Why do some models of weapons pass this cruel natural selection and become legends, like the PPSH or the Katyusha, while others, no less brilliant, vanish without a trace into the vortex of history, leaving behind only dusty blueprints and a couple of photos in the archives? The answer, my friends, lies not only in ballistics or accuracy. It lies in economics, in psychology, in the simple human factor. War is not a testing ground for masterpieces. War is a dirty, bloody hell where the cost of a single bullet, a single rifle, a single hour of a soldier's time cleaning his weapon is of colossal importance. Imagine an engineer. He is a genius. He doesn't sleep at night, drawing, calculating. He creates the weapon of his dreams. Accurate, powerful, multifunctional. He brings it to the military. And they look at him with tired eyes and ask just 3 questions. How much does it cost? How quickly can we teach a village boy to use it? How long will it work in a trench full of mud and water without a single breakdown? And more often than not, the brilliant project shatters against the harsh numbers of economics and the down-to-earth needs of the infantryman. The Second World War was not just a conflict. It was the total mobilization of all humanity. 62 out of the 74 states that existed at the time were drawn into it. Can you imagine? 80% of the world's population felt its breath one way or another. Industry worked to the point of exhaustion. Factories churned out equipment like hotcakes. And in this giant meat grinder, it wasn't the smartest weapon that survived, but the cheapest, simplest, and most reliable. Today, we are going on an amazing journey. We will pull 7 such losers out of oblivion. 7 brilliant but forgotten weapons. We won't just list them. We will try to understand why it happened this way. We will look into economic reports, thanks to Internet archives. Put ourselves in the shoes of a soldier in a trench and decide, did this rifle or that grenade launcher have chance? Ready? Then let's go. And our first stop is the controversial and elegant Tokarev self-loading rifle SVT-38. 1. SVT-38, the beautiful stranger that couldn't be loved. Emotional hook. What if I told you that a Soviet soldier in 1941 had a chance to have a weapon almost like the American infantry? An automatic rifle, firing faster than the famous 3-line. Sounds like science fiction, but it was a reality. A reality named SVT-38. What was it? The SVT-38 was not just a rifle. It was a breakthrough. The Soviet Union, seeing trends in world armament, understood. The future lies with self-loading weapons. Why manually reload a rifle after every shot if you can leave it to a mechanism? Fyodor Tokarev, a brilliant designer, created just such a system. Long, elegant, with a wooden stock running its full length, it looked like a weapon of a new generation. And its advantages were obvious. Rate of fire, up to 25 to 30 rounds per minute versus 8 to 10 for the Mosin rifle. In close combat, this could be a decisive advantage. Power, it used the same legendary 7.62 by 54 mm cartridge as the Mosin. So, the power remained top-notch. Prestige, the SVT-38 was a coveted trophy for the Germans. They, connoisseurs of quality weapons, gladly used captured SVTs, even adopting a modified version of it under the Index Selbstlagewehr 259R. That says something, doesn't it? Soviet Marines and Guards units simply adored it. So what was the problem? Why didn't it become the main rifle of the Red Army? And now, friends, let's come down from the heavens to earth. From the heavens of engineering, thought, to the dirty, damp trench of 1941. Economic background and analysis. The USSR on the eve of the war was a country that had passed through the grinders of industrialization, but still had a huge percentage of rural, poorly educated population. According to various estimates, up to 70% of conscripts had a very low level of technical literacy. For them, anything more complex than their grandfather's Burden or Mosin rifle was a mystery. Their fathers and grandfathers shot from Berdanks and Mosins, simple as a hammer and reliable as a rock. The SVT-38 was their complete opposite. It was finicky and capricious. Sensitivity to dirt. The gas-operated automatic mechanism was vulnerable. Any dust, sand, or thick lubricant in the cold, and the rifle turned into a regular, very heavy and useless stick. Complexity of maintenance. To disassemble and clean the SVT, a soldier had to be almost a mechanic. With the 3-line, everything was simpler. Any soldier could maintain it. Cost. Producing one SVT-38 was much more expensive than a Mosin rifle. Time is also a resource. And time spent assembling a complex mechanism in conditions where the front was catastrophically short of the simplest weapons was an unaffordable luxury. My opinion and reflections. I believe the SVT-38 was ahead of its time. It was a weapon for the army of the future, technically literate, well-equipped. But the USSR in '41 was not the USA. We didn't have that luxury. The war dictated its own rules. Give us 1,000,000 rifles. Any kind. But now, and they were given the simple, cheap, reliable Mosinka. And the beautiful SVT-38 was discontinued. Just under 192,000 units were produced. Its successor, the SVT-40, was simplified and produced in larger quantities, over 1 million, but the moment was lost. The lesson of history is cruel. A brilliant idea, without considering the context, is doomed to oblivion. 2. Dyakonov's rifle grenade launcher. The pocket artillery of the infantry that failed the speed test. Emotional hook. Imagine an ordinary private, Ivan. In his hands is a faithful 3-line, a Mosin rifle. It is accurate, reliable, but against an enemy machine gun in a pillbox or a group of soldiers behind a fold in the terrain, he is almost powerless. Wait for reinforcements? Call for artillery? What, there are none. And then, a strange iron contraption falls into his hands. A muzzle mortar. Now, says the commander, your rifle can shoot grenades up to 250 meters. Fantasy? No. The reality of 1941. The reality named Dyakonov's grenade launcher. What was it? It was a brilliantly simple idea, perfected by weapons engineer M.G. Dyakonov. A special mortar grenade launcher was attached to the muzzle of the Mosin rifle. An overcaliber grenade, meaning a grenade whose diameter was larger than the barrels, was inserted into it, and the magic was in the cartridge. For the shot, an ordinary live cartridge was used, but not entirely. The bullet, upon firing, passed through a special channel in the grenade's tail and flew further on its own trajectory. But the powder gases following the bullet hit the bottom of the grenade and knocked it out of the mortar. Cheap. Incredibly cheap. Effective? Theoretically, yes. The soldier received light artillery in his hands. No need to carry a separate mortar crew. Aim, and there you have a high explosive fragmentation shot at an enemy position behind a hill where a rifle can't reach. It was the infantry's weapon of retaliation. So what was the problem? Why didn't this pocket artillery become mass-produced? The problem, friends, lies in one word that on the battlefield sometimes means more than courage or bravery. This word is speed. Economic background and analysis. In 1941 and 42, the Red Army was fighting heavy defensive battles, often in encirclement with a shortage of ammunition under constant enemy pressure. Time was a key resource. Manage to dig in, you survive. Manage to run between bursts of fire, you stay alive. Manage to fire 5 shots while the enemy reloads, you kill him. Dyakonov's rifle grenade launcher was slow. The process of preparing for a shot was like a ritual, not combat work. Attach the mortar to the barrel. Load a special blank cartridge. This practice was later abandoned, but it added confusion. Carefully insert the grenade. Aim, accounting for complex ballistics. Fire. This took precious 30 to 40 seconds. Now imagine, an attack is underway. The Germans are running towards your position. You have a minute to do the maximum. What do you choose? Make one grenade shot that might miss? Or manage to make 5 to 7 aimed shots from the same rifle at the running soldiers? The answer is obvious. Furthermore, the system was cumbersome. The mortar itself and the grenades had considerable weight and size. An infantryman already carried at least 20 to 30 kilograms of equipment. Adding a few more kilograms of iron, that would be useful in one case out of 100. It was an unaffordable luxury. My opinion and reflections. I have mixed feelings about this invention. On one hand, it's a brilliant attempt to give an ordinary soldier unprecedented power. It was the prototype of future underbarrel grenade launchers, which are in service with all armies of the world today. The idea was absolutely correct. But on the other hand, its implementation was too clumsy for the dynamic nightmare of the Second World War. This is a weapon for positional trench warfare, like the First World War. But the Second World War was a war of motors, blitzkriegs, constant movement. Dyakonov's grenade launcher couldn't keep up with the pace. It was removed from service as early as 1942. But its spirit did not die. The principle of firing a grenade using a small arm was picked up and developed. And we see its direct descendants in the American M79, the Soviet GP-25, and of course, the legendary RPG-7. The lesson here is simple. Even the most brilliant tactical idea must have an operational, fast implementation. Otherwise, it will die without having been born. 3. EMP-35, the German tourist who came too early. Emotional hook. Now let's look west. Before the Sturmgewehr, before the MP-40, there was another Schmeisser. But not from Schmeisser. It was a solid, quality-built weapon that traveled halfway around the world before the war even started. It fought in Spain, China, and even in the ranks of the Red Army. Meet the EMP-35, the Irma company's export hit, which became a shadow participant in the world conflict. What was it? The EMP-35, Irma Maskinen Pistol, was a submachine gun developed by the German company Irma, originally for export and commercial sales. It had a robust, though somewhat outdated design by the late 30s, a wooden stock, a side-mounted magazine, and a fin barrel. It was a quality weapon assembled with German precision. It was used by the Republicans in Spain, by China in the war with Japan, and even purchased in small batches by the USSR before the war for study. Interestingly, captured EMP-35s were sometimes used by Soviet partisans. So what was the problem? Why was it replaced by the more famous MP-38 and MP-40? The answer lies in the words cost and mass production. Economic background and analysis. Production complexity. The EMP-35 used a lot of mill parts. Its production was labor-intensive and expensive. It was a weapon for professionals and for those who could pay. It was not a weapon for mobilizing millions. The advent of Volkswaffen. With the approach of war, the Wehrmacht needed not the best, but the most massive and cheap submachine guns. The MP-38, and especially the MP-40, were designed with mass production in mind. Extensive use of stamping, spot welding, and simplified parts. They were easier and faster to produce in the thousands. Tactical niche. The EMP-35 was a good weapon, but it found itself in the wrong place at the wrong time. By the beginning of the war, its design was considered outdated. However, it was actively used by the SS troops, who often had access to non-standard weapons. My opinion and reflections. The story of the EMP-35 is a story of a high-quality product losing to a cheaper and more technologically advanced competitor. It's like a reliable, hand-assembled car losing to a car from a Ford conveyor belt. It wasn't bad. It was just economically inefficient for a total war. Its main legacy is that it became one of the sources of inspiration for the creation of the legendary German MP series. It was a bridge from the complex to the simple, from the piecemeal to the mass-produced. 4. Taubin-Baburin automatic grenade launcher. The ghost of the future that appeared 30 years too soon. Emotional hook. Now get ready. We are moving from the trenches to the world of the boldest military fantasies. Imagine 1941. German infantry rises to attack. And suddenly, above their heads, not just bullets whistle, but a solid wall of fire and steel explodes, like an invisible scythe cutting down everything in its path. Rate of fire, 400 rounds per minute. This is not a machine gun. This is not mortar. This is something new. This is an automatic grenade launcher. And it was created in the USSR back in 1937. Sounds like alternate history? Alas, this was our reality, which we missed. What was it? The project of G. Taubin and V. In Baburin was a real breakthrough, ahead of its time by 3 or 4 decades. It was a full-fledged automatic weapon for a 40.8 millimeter grenade. Imagine a hybrid of a machine gun and a mortar. The firepower was monstrous. One such grenade launcher could create an impenetrable zone of destruction for enemy personnel over an area of several hundred square meters. It was planned to be installed on armored vehicles, ships, and even on aircraft for ground attack. Against infantry in open field, it would have been an absolute weapon. So what was the problem? Why did this monster never leave the testing ground? The answer, as always, is multifaceted, but it can be described in one word: complexity. Economic background and analysis. The USSR of the late 30s was a country preparing for a big war. Industry was geared towards the mass production of proven models. The same Mosin rifles, Maxim machine guns, later the PPSH. The Taubin-Baburin project was on a different technological level. Technological complexity. The automatic mechanism for such ammunition was extremely complex. It required the highest production standards, quality steels, and precise machining of parts. This wasn't stamping from sheet metal like the PPSH. This was piecemeal, almost jewelry-like production. Cost. One prototype of such a grenade launcher and its ammunition cost a fortune. In conditions where it was necessary to arm millions of soldiers, investing funds in an expensive and proven and complex project was considered an unacceptable risk. Logistics and ammunition. The grenades for this grenade launcher were no less complex to produce than the launcher itself. Imagine how many of these 40mm grenades would need to be produced to supply just one division. This would have created an unbearable burden on supply chains. My opinion and reflections. This is perhaps the saddest and yet most illustrative example in our list. The Taubin-Baburin automatic grenade launcher is not just a failure. It's a tragedy of being ahead of its time. It's a technology that came too early. The designers were looking to the future, while the military customers were looking at the realities of the present day. And those realities said, "We have no resources for your miracle. We need 10,000 simple machine guns by tomorrow." It's a great pity that the project was not finalized. If resources had been found, if the teething troubles had been overcome, this weapon could have radically changed infantry tactics during the war. It would have clearly shown what fire superiority means. But its legacy is alive. Look at modern armies. Automatic grenade launchers, AGS-17 Flame and AGS-30 Itland in Russia, MK-19 in the USA, these are direct embodiments of the idea of Taubin and Baburin. They have become an indispensable means of fire support. They just needed another 20 years for technology and economics to catch up with the bold thought of the Soviet engineers. This is the best epitaph for their creation. You were not accepted, but you were right. 5. PPD-42, the last gasp of a veteran, or why you don't change a winning team. Emotional hook. Imagine the designer Vasily Degtyaryov, a living legend. His DP-27 light machine gun became a real workhorse of the Red Army. His Degtyaryov submachine gun, PPD-34/40, was one of the first swallows of the Soviet assault rifle business. But it's already 1942. The war is in full swing, and his brainchild, the PPD, is already being actively squeezed off the assembly lines by the new, more technological and cheaper PPSH-41. What does the veteran feel? He doesn't give up. He presents his new, improved version to the military, the PPD-42. It wasn't just an upgrade. It was an attempt to regain leadership. And it was an epic fail. Why? What was it? The PPD-42 was an evolution of previous models. Dyakonov tried to take all comments into account. The weapon became more balanced, ergonomic, with a straight box magazine, like the later PPS-43, which solved the problem of cartridge misalignment inherent in drum magazines. It was simpler to produce than early PPDs, and it felt like the hand of a master striving for perfection. It looked modern, like a weapon from the 50s. So what was the problem? Why was this improved model rejected? The answer lies not in the realm of engineering, but in the realm of war industrial logistics. By the time the PPD-42 appeared, the USSR had already launched a giant, well-oiled machine for producing the PPSH. Economic background and analysis. The PPSH factor. By the beginning of 1942, the production of the PPSH-41 was put on a conveyor belt. Dozens of factories across the country, from Moscow to evacuated enterprises in Siberia, stamped it out by the thousands per day. Switching to the production of even the improved PPD-42 would have required stopping the conveyor belts for a day, a week, a month. Every day of downtime is thousands of weapons not received by the front. Retooling the machines. This is time, money, and engineering resources. Retraining personnel. Workers who had already brought the assembly of the PPSH to automatism would have to learn to assemble a different model from scratch. The best is the enemy of the good principle. The PPSH was not perfect. It was somewhat heavy, its drum magazine was finicky. But it existed. It was good enough. It was cheap and reliable. In war conditions, a good enough mass weapon always defeats an almost perfect but piecemeal one. My opinion and reflections. The story of the PPD-42 is a classic business situation where a product bestseller is already on the market, and an attempt to release its improved version is doomed because the costs of transition are not offset by the benefits. The front was screaming, "Give us more, faster." It had no time for minor improvements in ergonomics. This is a bitter but fair fate. Dyakonov did not lose to Shpagin as an engineer. He lost to him in the efficiency of the production model. The PPD-42 remained just a rare prototype, a page in history for collectors and enthusiasts. The lesson here is harsh. Even a brilliant designer is powerless against an established conveyor belt satisfying the immediate needs of war. 6. FG-42, the German universal soldier that the designer himself feared. Emotional hook. Now let's move to the other side of the front. German paratroopers, the elite of the Wehrmacht. They drop from the sky, catching the enemy by surprise. But they have a problem. Their main weapon is the Karabiner 98K, long, non-automatic. And after landing, they need to fight on equal terms with enemy infantry, who might have submachine guns. They need a long-range weapon for capturing a bridgehead and a short-range one for holding it. German engineers are tasked with creating a rifle that will be everything at once. A sniper rifle, an assault rifle, and a light machine gun. And they create the FG-42. Fallschirmjäger 42, paratrooper rifle model 42. This is not just a weapon. This is a work of art, or an engineering madman. What was it? The FG-42 was a masterpiece of weapons thought, a technological breakthrough. Sniper rifle. It had a sight rail for mounting an optical sight. Accuracy at medium distances was excellent. Assault rifle. Capable of semi-automatic and automatic fire. It used the powerful 7.92 times 57 mm Mauser cartridge, like standard rifles. Light machine gun. A special bipod attached to the barrel, and the ability to quickly change the barrel, on later models, for sustained automatic fire. It was made with incredible care for wartime. A milled receiver, a closed front sight, thoughtful ergonomics with a pistol grip. It was a rifle from the future that ended up in the 40s. So what was the problem? Why didn't this Swiss Army knife of the weapon world replace all the infantry rifles of the Wehrmacht? The answer, as you might have guessed, rests on three pillars: price, complexity, resource. Economic background and analysis. Production cost. One FG-42 cost the Wehrmacht more than an MG-34 light machine gun. Imagine, a universal pocket knife costs more than a full-fledged sword. This was absolutely unacceptable for a mass army. While German industry spent hours milling one receiver for the FG-42, it could have stamped 10 receivers for the MP-40. Technological complexity. The FG-42 was a weapon for professionals. It required careful maintenance, quality ammunition, and careful handling. It was not for an 18-year-old Volkssturm conscript called up in the last months of the war. Its finicky direct gas impingement system, where powder gases directly hit the bolt carrier, was sensitive to contamination. Resource: the barrel and other parts, designed for intensive automatic fire with a powerful cartridge, wore out quickly. The weapon was delicate. My opinion and reflections. The FG-42 is an example of how the pursuit of the ideal collides with the reality of total war. The Germans, like the Soviet engineers Taubin and Baburin, tried to jump over their heads. And they even succeeded. But the economy of the Third Reich, especially after 43, was cracking at the seams. They could no longer afford such luxury. This weapon is a symbol of the German Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapon. Beautiful, complex, but incapable of changing the course of the war. It was created for the elite, while the war is won by the mass army, armed with mass weapons. Nevertheless, its influence is enormous. Many solutions tested in the FG-42 later formed the basis of the American M60 machine gun and, partly, the Belgian FN-FEL battle rifle. It was a dead end that pointed in the right direction. 7. PPK-42, the most important failure in history. How a flop gave birth to a legend. Emotional hook. Now close your eyes and imagine. Not 1947, but 1942. Stalingrad. Hell on earth. In a hospital, after a severe wound, a young tank sergeant lies on a bed. His body is crippled, but his mind is feverishly working. He hears the infantrymen's complaints about their weapons. He sees its shortcomings with his own eyes. And he, not being an academician without a higher education, decides that he can do better. This sergeant's name is Mikhail Kalashnikov, and his first, biggest failure will become the foundation for the greatest triumph. Welcome to the world of the PPK-42. What was it? The PPK-42, Kalashnikov Submachine Gun Model 42, is not just a weapon model. It is willpower materialized. The first serious project of the future general designer. And you know what? It was a very interesting and thoughtful design. Kalashnikov, working in evacuation in Kazakhstan, in the railway workshops of Matai Station, created a submachine gun with a delayed blowback bolt. This is a complex and not the most common scheme, which speaks to the boldness of his thinking. The PPK-42 had its highlights. Separate assembly. The receiver assembly could be disassembled into two parts, facilitating cleaning and maintenance. Ergonomics. A thoughtful pistol grip and a fire selector convenient for one-handed use. Stamping. Kalashnikov was already thinking in terms of manufacturability, proposing to use stamping for the receiver, not milling. The weapon passed field tests. A whole commission of serious weapons scientists examined it. And this was not just a trinket from a sergeant. It was a seriously considered project. So what was the problem? Why did the commission say no? The answer, this time, was the verdict of specialists: unreliability and complexity. Economic background and analysis. The tests revealed the main drawbacks. Design immaturity. The delayed blowback system chosen by Kalashnikov was complex and, in his implementation, proved unreliable. The bolt could fail to feed a cartridge, and there could be delays. In war, where a weapon failure equals death, this was a death sentence. Technological problems. Despite the idea of stamping, the overall design was still deemed too complex for mass production in wartime. It required fine-tuning, revision, and time. Lack of necessity. By the time of the PPK-42 tests, in a 42, beginning of 43, industry was already churning out tens of thousands of PPSHs and beginning production of the PPS. The supply system was established. Launching a new, raw, and proven model into this well-oiled system, which did not have cardinal advantages over the existing ones, was pointless. The commission's verdict was harsh but absolutely fair. The manufacture of Kalashnikov submachine gun is currently impractical due to the complexity of the design and the large number of shortcomings. My opinion and reflections. This is the most important lesson for each of us. Not only for gunsmiths, for any inventor, entrepreneur, or just a person trying to create something. The PPK-42 was not a failure. It was Mikhail Kalashnikov's most important training. Imagine his feelings. Young, ambitious guy, put his soul into it, went through the testing ground, and got a rejection. Harsh, justified, but a rejection. Many would have broken, but Kalashnikov did not. He didn't burn the blueprints in despair. He analyzed them. He understood where he went wrong. He went to study. He figured out why his complex system lost in reliability to the simple blowback bolt of the PPSH. It was this failure that tempered him. It was from the ashes of the PPK-42 that his next project began to grow, a carbine, and then a light machine gun. And then there was a competition for a new assault rifle for an intermediate cartridge. And their Kalashnikov, already taught by bitter experience, came not with a beautiful but raw fantasy, but with a simple, brilliant as a crowbar, and incredibly reliable design. A design born from the analysis of every breakdown, every failure of the PPK-42. The AK-47 is the direct descendant and heir to all the mistakes of the PPK-42. Without this failure, there would have been no triumph. Kalashnikov himself repeatedly said that this first negative experience was invaluable to him. So how many more such models are gathering dust in the archives? We've seen 7, but there are hundreds. The fate of a weapon, like the fate of a person, depends on millions of circumstances. But the main conclusion I want you to take away from this long, but hopefully exciting story is this. A mass weapon, like any mass successful product, must be simple, reliable, and cheap. Genius lies not in complexity, but in the ability to find the perfect balance between effectiveness, cost, and simplicity. After all, the more parts in a mechanism, the more potential breakdowns. And in war, as in life, the cost of a breakdown can be too high. Lessons from forgotten metal. What we take away from this story? Well, friends, our journey through the Museum of Forgotten Weapons is coming to an end. We have come a long way from the capricious beauty SVT to the first painful breakthrough of Kalashnikov. We have witnessed the triumph of ideas over possibilities and possibilities over ideas. The fate of a weapon, like the fate of a person, depends on a million factors. And the main conclusion I have drawn for myself, and which I want to convey to you, is this. Genius in the conditions of total war is measured not by innovations on the drawing board, but by the balance on the assembly line. What is more important for victory? One perfect, ultra-accurate rifle that only a select few can use? Or 10,000 simple, reliable as a crowbar PPSHs that will fall in the hands of 10,000 soldiers and do their job? History has given us an unambiguous answer. War is mathematics. It is a cold calculation. It is the number of rounds per minute divided by the cost of production, multiplied by reliability and ease of training. The models we have analyzed today lost precisely in this mathematical formula. They were too expensive, too complex, too capricious for their era. But does this mean they were useless? Absolutely not. They were untimely. They were training grounds for geniuses. The failure of the PPK-42 gave birth to the genius of the AK-47. The complexity of the FG-42 showed what to strive for in the future. Taubin-Baburin's automatic grenade launcher was ahead of its time by 20 years. They were stars that could not ignite at that moment, but their light, their ideas, inspired other generations of designers. They are the losers who helped others become winners. That's all, friends. Our investigation is complete. I hope it made you think not only about weapons, but also about the fate of brilliant ideas in our complex world. And now I'm waiting for your opinion. Write in the comments. Which of these 7 weapons do you consider the most promising? Which of these failures do you regret the most? Or maybe you think the decision on the PPK-42 was unfair. Your opinion is priceless. If you were as interested as I was, if you learned something new, Do two simple things that will help the channel grow. Subscribe to the channel. Dozens more exciting topics await us. Like and share this story with like-minded friends. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. Remember, history teaches even when it speaks in the whisper of forgotten blueprints. See you soon.